Hello everybody. As you can see on the screen, I got Illustrator loaded. I am a couple versions behind. I do not have CC, do not plan on getting CC right at this moment. I have CS6, CS5 should be able to work with this, and on up from there. And what I'm talking about is how attributes are handled by Illustrator. Now, I know other programs like CorelDRAW, Inkscape, which I've previewed a few times, you can put stroke on things and everything else, and you can manipulate it somewhat. But depends on how much control and how much of a control freak you are will depend on if you find this cool or not. That's why I'm going to probably put this as an Illustrator coolness properties of objects, because everything in here is pretty much an object, whether it's a square that you create, text, whatever, and all this does apply. Now on text, when we get to it, is a little bit in the special side, and I'll show you why. But let's go ahead, and we're starting in Illustrator. Again, this is not really a teach you how to use Illustrator technique. This is showing you what is possible that you can play with. I'm not going to show you every case scenario, nor is everything I'm going to do today pretty. So just take these techniques and kind of let this be a guide for you to kind of on your own see where you go with this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the old rectangle tool here, draw something out, grab this tool, and it's barking at me because I don't have something selected. I'm going to round these corners off real quick. That's another thing that some people don't like about Illustrator, is it can be kind of finicky and fussy. Again, people who use Illustrator for years be like, well, I don't have that problem because, again, they're used to it. But I've actually I went from using Illustrator to a few other programs, so to me it is kind of acting a little fussy. But anyway, I'm just going to draw a shape, and it's going to be kind of a weird shape, and you'll see why I'm wanting kind of a weird shape in a minute. Explain what this video is about. Okay, that'll work. Kind of looks like a weird boomerang looking thing. Back out just a touch. Alright. Now over here is your appearance palette. Now Illustrator, like a few other programs, there's several different ways you can control how something looks. Up here in this bar here, that will change, depends on your tool. You can change attributes such as fill, stroke, stroke width, stroke properties, on down the line. You can also change your fill and stroke here or in the appearance palette. Now the appearance palette is where we're going to focus today. And the reason why is because you can do some pretty neat things with the appearance palette. Okay, not only can you say, hey, I want a stroke or not, but you can do, like I'm getting ready to show, things that other programs, Inkscape, as far as I know, CorelDRAW cannot do this. A few other programs can't do, which some people, again, may find useful. Some will say, I don't need that functionality, but I appreciate you bringing that to my light. And the thing is that even though that what I got here on the screen, let me go ahead and select it, is an object. As you can see over here, it's a path. Okay, the attributes that go with it is considered separate. And you'd be like, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, in other programs, for example, I can only set the color. I can set maybe where the stroke goes. I can see where the stroke is as far as in, which side of the line. I can choose my fill and everything else. But what if I told you I can actually, in this program, shift everything around without having to make it into separate objects? Because in other programs, in order to do what I'm getting ready to demonstrate in Illustrator, you got to basically take your outline, convert it to an object, then you can move it, and everything else. Which, if that's your workflow, great. Go ahead and keep doing it. I'm just showing Illustrator here, excuse me, because Illustrator can do this without you having a whole bunch of objects in your palette, and I'll get ready to show that. Okay, here's my appearance palette. I'm going to get down here to my layers palette. See, I only got one layer. I got one object. Okay, I don't have anything else. There's something there said, and I have a type object. I'm going to get rid of that. So okay. So now I only got one object. Don't know how that other happened, but hey, that's okay too. Back to my appearance palette. Select it. Make sure you select something. Do text. It'll show up here what you got selected. So right now I got a path, and that's what I want. And again, I could go in here and say, hey, I want to change this fill to something. Pardon me. I'm going to change it to blue. Okay. I'm going to go up to the stroke. Change it to maybe this color here. And increase its weight. Nothing new here, right, folks? Same thing you could do with anything else and everything else. Okay, now some programs will not allow you to change the opacity here, which means you can change what's blending mode. If you're used to Photoshop, these work very closely to how Photoshop's blend modes work. Actually, they work exactly how they work. Excuse me. So you got the ability to do blend modes right off the bat, and this is not a separate object, folks. This is the stroke that I'm manipulating right here. You can change its opacity. You can even isolate how things work here. You can even kind of get the little tool tips here to, on your own to kind of do this. I'm just running through real quick. But the one thing I will do is opacity real quick. See, I can drop that down to a 50% opacity, and as you can see, as we zoom in, see, it's now interacting with the color beneath it. Zoom back out. And make sure my path is still selected. It is. Go to opacity. Turn this back up to 100%. Now, watch what I can do here. Without changing it into two different objects, Illustrator will allow you to add more fills and more strokes to a single object to get a different type of effects. And the effect I'm going for is like, I'm not sure if it was in the 50s or 60s where they had the objects where their outline was kind of up and off the objects and things like that. That's what I'm going to replicate here real quick. And I can do that by, first of all, making my kind of a futuristic looking object here. Make sure I've got my path selected, and then I'm going to click on the stroke. And anytime you know that you've got something selected in Illustrator, at least in my version right now with my preferences, it'll be highlighted in blue. So it's highlighted. Now I'm going to sit there and go down to the FX. Now you can either click here or you can go up here to Effect and work on them here. Whichever way is better for you. I'm just going to use the palette. What I'm going to do is go to Distort Transform and go to Transform. It'll pop up a dialog box here. Make sure that if you're going to mess with the stroke and other objects, make sure that if you're going to use the transform at least, make sure that these options are pretty much checked. If you need to uncheck them for some reason, go ahead and do so. But now, every time you turn this on, you're going to turn the preview box on, at least on CS6. I'm not sure if CC fixed the problem or what. Anyway, get back to our little thing here. Now I'm going to use the move. What I want to do is offset the stroke off the main object. So, as you see, as I move my little sliders, I'm offsetting my stroke. Get it to however I want it. That looks kind of cool. I'm going to say OK. Now check this out. Now in order to do this in other programs, like I said, most of the time you got to convert the stroke to a separate object and then break that group apart. A lot of times it'll group. I know Illustrator will group it when you do that. And then move it. The cool thing about doing it that way is you can get the spacing and everything. But the cool thing about doing it Illustrator's way at this moment is if I ever need to change the thickness, add another effect, whatever, I don't have to go back and do a bunch of undos and get it done. Or remember, okay, this stroke was originally this, it was put here. I don't have to remember any of that. Okay, and to show you it is still one object, I'll select it, go back down to the layer, one object, see, one path. That's it. It looks like two, but it's not, because Illustrator, again, allows you to manipulate the attributes separately from the object. And you're like, well, I mean, I kind of see the stroke, but, can that happen with a fill? Absolutely, folks. Now, there's two ways to do it. You can either duplicate what's already here by clicking this little icon here. That would duplicate the selected item. Or you can go over here and you can add new strokes, new fills, or a new effect. I'm going to click on new fill. Okay, this is the one that's on top. We'll go to orange. Now it looks like I replaced my fill. Okay, and I did not. What has happened, see if I turn this off, it's just resting on top of the other. So like if I want to send this one, again to the up and right, or change the opacity and everything, I can do that as well. So make sure my object is selected. Select this. Go up to our distort and transform. Put transform on it. Preview it. This time we'll move it the other way. But this time we want to change the opacity. So after I get that done, let's go ahead and get a little fancy with it. Let's go to opacity. We'll change this down to about 50%. So, but you can see where I'm getting at. You can keep adding things and adding things and adding things and do some pretty interesting things with it. So I'm going to say that I'm done with that. But selecting this fill again, I'm going to go up to another effects, and you can stack effects, folks. Just don't think you can do only one or two. You can keep stacking these effects. Pardon me. Like I'm going to go over here to distort, and I'm going to choose roughen. And you can do things like this. You can say relative or absolute, and you can say, okay, how much detail do you want in here, and what size do you want it? Again, this is an attribute that is added to the object, to the stroke of the object, I should say. And the cool thing is, it's that you're like, I really didn't like it on the upper fill. I like to have it on the lower fill. That's no problem. You could take whatever of these you need, like roughen, just move it to there, and see, now it's below everything. That's why it's roughening everything. It's because it's below everything. What I needed to do was put it here. See, now it only roughens that object. And that's another point I'm getting ready to get into, is if you want an effect to happen to everything, your custom offsets, if you got them, roughens, or whatever, make sure in the appearance palette here, click on the uppermost thing, which will tell you what your object is, whether it's type, path, or whatever. For an example, in this path here, I'll go up here to effect, go to warp, do something very ugly here. Again, folks, this is not supposed to be anything too pretty, but I'm just trying to show you that, hey, look, you can do some stuff that's pretty insanely cool without having a lot of separation of objects, and okay, I have to repeat this thing on all objects and everything else. You don't have to do that. As you can see, this happened to everybody. You can see the original outline path there, and again, I could go back down to my layers. Only got one path, but it looks like I got 2 or 3 things going on here, which is cool. Okay, so go back here and say, like, you're like, you know what, I really did not like how that turned out. Okay, you can go to the effect that you got, see the warp twist. Like, I don't like that. We'll just take it, delete it, and you're done. Okay, simple. That's with an object. That's with any object that you can either pin trace or anything else in here. Will work, except for objects such as in bitmaps. It probably will not happen with a bitmap, so don't even try it. So I'm going to delete this object, and we're going to go with text. Pardon me again, folks. I do apologize. I'm just going to type retro all the way here in a pretty cool font called Americana. Okay, as my thing here, I'm just going to stretch it out. It don't matter how pretty it really is. Now, look at my appearance palette. I'm on my default appearance. Here is where you gotta be careful. Now, if you're just gonna do something basic, I do apologize for that. My allergies are kicking up, and I'm trying to, take care of that, and I'm brushing against the microphone and making all sorts of noise. if you're going to want to affect only the characters itself, you can still add fills and strokes to it. But if you're only going to affect it at one time and say, okay, cool, that's all I'm going to use, then just double click characters, you'll highlight it, automatically select your text tool. But now you can say, okay, I want a stroke here, I want a fill. Okay, if you're just going to do just some basic stuff, not really get crazy or weird, that's the way you would probably most likely want to handle it. Me, I want to not only get some stuff on here, but I want it to be dynamic. I don't want to change these characters into shapes, and then have to remember, oh, this is what I did here, this is what I did here. I don't want to do it. I want to be able to do my effects, be done with it, and then turn around, and be able to put it into my illustration, whatever I'm doing. Okay, so what you want is you want to be out here where it says type. Don't select it where it says type no appearance and then characters here. You want to be where it says type. Make sure you got it selected, which we do. Now, as you see here, as our other example, we already had a default fill and stroke. We're going to add what we want here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I want a fill. As you see, it puts in a fill and a stroke of nothing. Kind of like what we saw when we double-clicked into the characters. This time I want that blue color again. See? Boom. I get my colors. Do that. That's kind of a nice retro color, I guess. Okay. Now, something real quick. When you click on these little swatches, these little swatch things here like this, you only get your default swatches here. Now, if you want to change that, just make sure that your object is selected and that the stroke or fill that you want to affect is highlighted. Then you can go down here and you can either drag or drop colors onto here, or you can double click like I'm doing right here. I'm going to get like a real light pink. And now I got a real light pink here. And as you see, it reflects that into the appearance palette. Go ahead and jack this up. Now, as you notice, as I jack it up, it looks really ugly. It's encroaching on the letters and everything else. See, that's the cool thing about this thing. Now, some programs will let you position the stroke, and you can do it in Illustrator, but sometimes I want that effect that, hey, look, it's coming from the back. It's kind of enhancing my lettering from the back. No problem. Just grab it, put it behind the fill, and look at that. Now I can keep adjusting it, to whatever I want. Okay? Alright. And then you're like, well, okay, that's kind of cool and everything else. Well, yeah, it is. And does the fun stop there? Definitely not. Like, I'm going to go ahead and keep going right now. I'm going to add a new stroke. I'm going to move it to as a front, and see, it's going to be way too much. I also want to change this color, so I want to highlight this. Again, I'm going to show you if you've got the right thing highlighted, you can kind of choose see how that changed in my other stroke? It has not, and I'll show you in just a second once I start getting this down. See all of a sudden how I got this kind of multiple stroke effect? Okay, and it's still with one thing of type. I now demonstrate that. See, I go into layer 1. There's my type layer. Okay, I turn it off. Everything turns off. I turn it on. I turn it on. And I'll show you that right now these are still dynamic. But let's do some weird and kind of out of the way things here. So let's go back to the appearance palette. And I apologize. And let's go ahead and do the simple effect of just offsetting this. Again, folks, when you come in here to try it with Illustrator, because there's demonstrations, not demonstrations, I'm sorry, 30-day trials of the software so you can try it yourself. Maybe you can use some of this, maybe you can't. And I'm going to use transform. Oop, I don't have a selection. I just realized, see, it says no selection. Now it says type. I'm on stroke. Now it will do the effect. Be sure to watch where you're at in Illustrator, because that's one thing that's going to irritate a lot of people new to Illustrator, is if you don't see where you're at, it can irritate the living fire out of you. Okay, here's another thing you could do. Like, okay, let's do a thing of let's do 80 here. Click, and I'm going to do 80 here. That might be too much. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to do about 95 here. Alright. And we'll move a little bit. You can do both things at the same time. You're not limited. And that's good. I know, like I said, it's ugly. Again, folks, it's not meant to be showing you how pretty something is or anything else. I'm just showing you this. Now, if you just want to, for example, make sure it's selected, arc this top stroke. Excuse me. Make sure you got that selected, and then you can go warp and arc, for example. Preview it and look. Boom. Only that piece is done. I'll just leave it alone. We'll back out of it so you can see it, how ugly this really has gotten. Excuse me. But then again, it looks like I've got several objects going on this page, and I don't. Back over to my layer. One layer, one object. I turn that object off, on, there it is. Now, say like I want the whole object to do that. There's two ways you could do it. You can either undo it and then redo it, or, again, look at where you're at in this palette. Okay, it says, okay, warp arc. Well, take this and put it on top. Now, everything is done that way. Everything is warped. And it's dynamic. Like, hey, I didn't want the arc. I wanted only to arc the upper, the lower. You know, you could do that, or say, no, I want an upper. You know, you can change these. I'll set these distortions to 0 so it won't be so bad. You can just tab through here. I'm just clicking. But you can see how it's affecting everything. And it's dynamic. Now, if you ever did, because you're going to another program that doesn't support everything that Illustrator does, then you can make everything kind of objects. You just do that by going to objects and going to expand. And if you have raster effects, you go to expand appearance. But if you want to make it like a JPEG or a pixel type thing to manipulate in another program, then you can go to rasterize and it will flatten it down to a raster image. But right now this is dynamic, and I'll show you how dynamic it is. I'm going to double click this object. Okay. Put my cursor at the end here. Back it off. And I'm going to type something else. See how everything reflowed? See how all of my stuff redid? How all the outlines just totally just redid themselves without me having to go, oh, okay, now I got to go and remember how I did all this and this and this. That is the beauty of how this works. And if you repeat, I don't know who in God's creation would think that this is cool enough to do a style with, but if you wanted to, you can actually save this look by selecting it. Just selected now. You can go to the graphic style tab, and then you can click this button here, which is add new graphic style. And what it will do is it will replicate all this. Now you got to be careful, because whatever point size, this is made from whatever the point size of our original font was when we started, and its distortions. If you put it on something too small, too large, because of these offsets, it's going to look really ugly and silly. So just be careful of that. If it's something that you're constantly doing and you want to save the style, go ahead. Last thing I will touch on is yes, you can also do this with drop shadows and other things, and yes, you can do it with only a part of your object. Excuse me. So like, for example, I'm going to make sure this is selected, click on fill, and we'll go here to stylize. We'll do an inner glow. Turn on my preview. Yeah, I got the inner glow inside these letters here. Let me zoom in so you can really see it. I know my screen is probably not the best right now, but let me cancel this and go in. There you go. Now I'll do it. Stylize inner glow. Turn on this. Get it a pinkish color. Actually, let's red type of rose color maybe. There we go. And you can change how it interacts. It can be, you can have it darkened by doing the multiply mode if you want. The world is your oyster. You can go to the center of the object like that, or you can go to the edge. Again, just play with it. And yes, drop shadow is included in this. And again, it is, because I did it this way, it is totally changeable and still editable. Grab my type tool, go back and type awesome. Okay. Again, look. The stylize changed. Everything changed. And again, just to prove one more time, it's only one object. There it is. So, folks, again, like I said, I kind of find this kind of neat. This is some things that, as far as I know, only Illustrator does. If another program can do something similar to this, pardon me again, folks, please let me know, because I'd love to see, how it exactly works. But until next time, folks, if you have Illustrator, fire it up and try it. This may be something cool that you can use on your next project. Maybe it isn't. But again, I just wanted to showcase this because, I see people all the time going in Illustrator, changing things around, and I'm like, you don't really need to be doing all that, dude. Illustrator can do that for you. And as you can see, right here, works very nicely. So until next time, folks, have a good one. And again, let me know in the comments, if you can find another program that can do this type of thing. And I'll see y'all next time.